Welcome to the Backlot 605 podcast. I am one of your hosts. I am Casey Calderman. Joined with me, as always, is Mr. Brian Mensing. Brian, how are you?
Not doing too bad.
Good.
You know, it's a nice, wonderful Monday after a holiday.
It is. How was your Christmas? Maybe that's where we should start with this. How was Christmas?
Most of my Christmas took place on Christmas Eve. I didn't do a whole lot of much, if anything, on Christmas because most things were closed.
Same here. That was my Christmas day, was watching movies at home. So that was all right.
Mm-hmm.
I have never done that, so that was fun. But today we are joined here on episode 112 of the Backlot 605 podcast. We are on our last episode of our David Fincher series for the month of December. We are talking about his latest film, Mank, the whole reason we're doing this series here in December. And we are joined by John Small from Sunny Radio. John, how are you?
Good. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
I'll take it.
Good. How was your Christmas?
It was good. Got to see some family. Got to open presents and all that fun stuff. So it was good.
Good. And hey, I'm so glad that we have you on this episode. It's over this kind of weird time where we're in between Christmas and New Year's, and everybody's either like, I'm taking a break, I'm done with work for a whole 2 weeks or whatever. So I'm so glad you came on, and man, I'm glad that you're on this episode to talk about this movie with us. So
I watched the movie, which I'm glad that I'm on this as well. Otherwise, I might not have watched it, but I'm glad that I did. It was a good movie.
Good. I'm glad I'm stoked to talk about this in the second half here. This whole series has been super fun to talk about Fincher's career. And now that we're at the kind of culmination of it so far, I mean, he'll obviously make more films. But
please do.
Yeah, please do. And I mean, I watched this and Citizen Kane over the last couple of days. So it was, a great refresher for Citizen Kane, and great to see another half of that story. But that'll be in the second half of the show when we talk about Mank. But first of all, let's jump into the box office for this week, because this week, for us movie fans, this is kind of good news. This is some good looking box office numbers for this week. Of course, number one is Wonder Woman 1984, $16.7 million, the highest opening weekend during the pandemic. Onward was probably the last one that we had, and that was in March that broke this high of number. So
what was Crude's? Cruise was close.
Crude's was over 10. It was 11 or 12. So I think this is good numbers, especially for the situation that Wonder Woman 1984 is in, is that it was released in theaters on a holiday, which is usually a good spot for it on Christmas Day. But it was also released on HBO Max with an HBO Max subscription. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. What do you guys think of these numbers? $16.7 million. That's a good opening weekend during the crazy times that it is right now.
I think 16.7 for the fact that it was dual release with HBO Max is huge, because I probably would have attempted, since I didn't have anything going on Christmas Day, I probably would have possibly attempted to go see it at the theater had I not been like, you know what? I'm good. I'll stick at home. I've got HBO. So, I did a double feature of this and Soul. So, that would have been something that if those would both been in theater to the point where it wasn't available like it was, I might have done a double feature at the theater. So I think these are actually really good numbers, considering I bet you there's quite a few people that watched it at home this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that the number one movie brought in $16 million when it was like over $100 million to make it, wasn't it? So,
easily.
I got to pull up the original. It was like a 84 or 74% drop between the first Wonder Woman and this one. I mean, that just goes to show how crazy it was.
Well, because I want to say domestically it was like 100-something opening weekend for the first Wonder Woman.
Pretty unfair comparison between the two, but
right.
103 was the opening for Wonder Woman 3 years ago.
Hey, I was pretty close, wasn't I?
Mm-hmm. So again, I think this is good numbers. I think HBO and Warner Brothers has to be thinking this is good. We're number one at the box office, highest opening for the last 9 months. So that's really good. And I would think their subscriber count went through the roof for this last month.
Yeah, people are for a reason, a nice little incentive to sign up.
Mm-hmm. Number 2 is another new movie that we had in theaters this past weekend. News of the World, the Tom Hanks Western, $2.4 million. Again, good numbers for this movie. It is a Netflix acquired movie, so this will be heading to Netflix in a few months. So it's nice again to see that Wonder Woman was bringing in the bank here this past weekend, but also a Tom Hanks Western is pulling in that number 2 spot.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around a Tom Hanks in Western. Like America's Dad, I don't see in Western type of. So this will be one I'm looking forward to watching.
Yeah, I'm surprised he's never been in a Western. That was my biggest thing, is when people were saying Tom Hanks is in a Western. I'm like, wait, he's never done a Western. That's right. I'm like, that seems so perfect.
But he was Woody the Cowboy, though, so he was kind of,
That's true.
He's like, I played a cowboy for 25 years. Might as well do it on screen for real.
But it was never in a Western.
Right. Maybe we need to get we need to get America's, 2 dads, Kevin Costner and Tom Hanks in a Western.
I would watch that.
I would watch that.
Yeah. Number 3 this week is a movie we previously mentioned, The Croods: A New Age, which has been doing very well in the box office the last couple weeks. $1.73 million. Again, good numbers for this movie, and I believe this was maybe it was last week. That was the first week that it was on premium VOD. So it's available at home at the same time. So again, good numbers for this movie here over a month into its release.
I'd say this is pretty decent for it. It's pretty much the only like kids movie. Like if you're going to take your kids out, what are you going to go see? This is pretty much it. So I'd say it's pretty decent.
Mm-hmm. What I'm really surprised by is here number 4, and I'm very excited about this because we have 4 movies above $1 million. It's weird to be excited about that, but it is. Monster Hunter, number 4, $1.1 million. Again, this movie's doing as good as it could during a pandemic, and it's
doing okay.
With the mixed reviews that it has, it's why not have a Paul W.S. Anderson sci-fi action movie in the top 5? Why not?
Mm-hmm.
And then rounding out the top 5, again, this is another new release. Promising Young Woman, $680,000. I like that we're having all these new releases here during Christmas. We talked a lot about them last week, and it's good to see that they're actually getting audiences to them, because I feel I've gone to the theater a couple times since March, and I have felt nothing but safe going to a movie theater, which is very odd because you're in a very confined space for 2 hours at a time. But I've felt nothing but safe, so it's nice to see that people are also feeling the safety of that and the precaution that these theaters are taking to get people to come in.
Oh yeah, I think our theaters seem to be a lot safer to go to now than they did, beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still looking forward to this one here. This one, I don't know if I'll get a chance to see it in the theaters, but it looks very quote unquote promising, and I can't wait to see this one.
Yeah, like you said, it looks promising when it's called Promising Young Woman.
Yeah, right. Low hanging fruit. I had to go for it.
Success.
We like the easy jokes here. That's what we like. So rounding out the top 5, let's go through it again. Wonder Woman 1984, number 1, 16.7. Number 2, News of the World, 2.4. Number 3, The Croods: A New Age, 1.7. Number 4, Monster Hunter, 1.1. And then number 5, Promising Young Woman, 680,000.
Nice.
So that is the box office for the week. Brian, let's move on to the news for the week.
The wonderful news? We can certainly bring on to the wonderful news, the wonderful little bit of news that we have here.
Were you going with another joke with the wonderful news?
No, that was completely, if that was low-hanging fruit, I completely didn't realize I caught it. And that would be Wonder Woman 3 has been announced that Gal Gadot and Patty Jenkins will be returning to, quote unquote, one of the articles I saw was to conclude the trilogy. I didn't know this was the trilogy that they were concluding in the first place. Typically you find where a lot of the studios, they wait to see what the box office is going to be and what are we going to continue to do this and blah, blah, blah. And obviously this is the year you can't look at the box office for Wonder Woman 2 and go, well, it didn't do so well, so we're not going to make a third one. I'm not honestly surprised that Warner Brothers and DC Films is greenlighting on Wonder Woman 3. Gal Gadot is, I think, personally fantastic as Wonder Woman, and I'd like to see where they continue this story. So I'm for this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wasn't a fan of 1984. I did not like the movie, but I will stay in the positive. I do want to see this. I want to see a third movie. I want to see them finish their trilogy. I mean, Wonder Woman, the first one, I thought was a great introduction to the big screen character of Wonder Woman. Two, I think, was a misstep, but I'm excited to see what Gal Gadot and Patty Jenkins can do with a new story. I'm ready for her to get away from the Steve Trevor stuff, and I think this 1984 gets that story concluded, and now we can move on past that. So very excited to see what those two can do to end the trilogy. I mean, I count it as a trilogy because I mean Justice League and Batman versus Superman were not good. So I will let the other two stay aside from Justice League and Batman versus Superman.
Let her have her own versions of the character.
Yes. John, are you a fan of the Wonder Woman movies or the DC movies at all?
I've not seen 1984, so I can tell you all that I've seen about it online. I've not read anything super positive, which is not good. But I've not seen it myself yet, so I don't really have a. I watched the trailer. Does that count for anything? So.
I will say this as someone who has watched it, and obviously I know Casey's not so much of a fan of it, whatnot. I do. Part of this, maybe this is my age because I grew up through the 80s. Is I do get the campiness of some of the 80s, and we're going from the dark and grungy of World War II to the bright and colors of the 1980s and whatnot. And I do think there's a bit of a campiness that is involved with it. I think there was a lot more that was involved with the Steve Trevor, the Princess Diana, aspect of it. Maybe not as much action as we would like, but I'd say it's still at least worth the watching, the entertaining. I definitely gave it much more of a positive review than I know that Casey did. So I'd say it's definitely at least worth watch.
It's one of those movies that is going to be very divided. Like you're
Yes.
either going to like it or you're really not going to like it. So it's one of those movies like you kind of have to watch to get your own opinion on.
Yes, definitely.
Check it out.
Yeah.
All right, on to the next one here, and Casey might actually have to help me with this one here. David Gordon Green talks to direct the Blumhouse upcoming sequel to The Exorcist because Blumhouse wants to get a hold of pretty much every horror franchise they possibly can. In terms of giving me some, whether this is some excitement or not, here, Casey, what can you give me for David Gordon Green that I would possibly know that would say this is a good addition to this?
He directed Blumhouse's Halloween.
Okay, I'll give you that.
And Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends. So he's in that family. He's definitely their kind of go-to guy. I know he's been in talks for other stuff with them too. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that they're sticking in his kind of wheelhouse of being able to revitalize a classic horror series. I would assume he'll take the exact same route he took with the Halloween series and forget the sequels, and just go straight to the original The Exorcist, which I get. That's kind of an easy, clean slate to do, even though Exorcist 3 is a masterpiece on its own. But yeah, I think he's a interesting director to take on this series, to say the least. I think going from the indie films that he started with into the Seth Rogen and James Franco comedies and now doing the Halloween series, he's had a very interesting career. So it'll be a nice change of pace in a way for him to go into a dramatic supernatural thriller like The Exorcist is.
Well, you bring up an interesting point that makes me kind of wonder what direction this goes. Here's the fact that, I guess, unbeknownst to me, you're talking about like the Seth Rogen route and whatnot. Question tells me is that if he's already attached and has been a part of the Halloween franchise, do we get an Exorcist-produced Danny McBride movie?
Hey, he better just be in the movie.
Well, I'm just saying, because the first time I heard Danny McBride attached to Halloween, I was kind of skeptical. Mm-hmm. And then I saw Halloween and I realized, okay, I'm going to give more props to these comedy guys that are doing the horror stuff, i.e. him and Jordan Peele and stuff like that. I'm like, you know what? Hey, if he wants to say, I'm going to get my hands in The Exorcist after watching Halloween, I don't have a reservation to that. I would be completely okay with that if he's got the eye for it, and so does this Green director. More power to them. Give me good, excellent horror films.
I mean, Danny McBride's already been in a movie that's parodied The Exorcist, and This Is the End, which has a great Exorcist scene with Jonah Hill. So
yes.
he's no stranger to having that included in his movie. So I think he might be involved, maybe in a producing status as well.
I hope so.
Yeah. So go ahead.
I was going to say, in terms of news, well, that's it.
Yeah. That is it. That's another. Disney took all our news 2 weeks ago, and now we're just kind of like, well, here's a little bit every week.
Not a lot of stuff going on in the world right now for movies.
No.
If we're hearing anything, it's, hey, look, we started production again.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that's interesting. In 2020, I've had a chance to visit with several people. We do a feature called Movie Star Monday, and every Monday we talk to somebody in different movies. But just the difference for people who are actually working this year, how different that's been for them. Mm-hmm. And some of them where the budget and everything was set before COVID, and then now they're actually working on projects where they're going, okay, well, we're changing this because now it's not going to be in theaters. It's going to actually come out in Netflix, or it's going to come out through Amazon Prime. So just to see the way the whole industry's changed in 2020 has been kind of interesting.
Well, and you brought up a good point, is the fact, like movies are said to be made, and whether or not where they were going to end up, a year from now, 2 years from now, the first word I caught out of you is the budget's been set. Well, you already know that budgets are already having to be reevaluated because they have to go through all of the time, the money, and energy of setting all these safety protocols, all this testing in place, just so then they know they can actually complete the movie.
Well, and there are movies that were completely finished and ready to be released in 2020 that they're just sitting on right now. The Ghostbusters movie was supposed to come out this year, and when I had a chance,
the Furious movie.
Yeah. When I had a chance to visit with one of the gentlemen there, I talked to Ernie Hudson, and I also talked with Ray Parker Jr. And Ray Parker Jr. has a movie that it's coming out at the same time, even though it's not attached to that. It's a Ghostbuster music movie that he's doing. It's called Who You Gonna Call? And it's ready to go too, but he said, I'm waiting until the movie comes out because it's going to do so much better when the new movie comes out.
Oh, absolutely.
So those are two projects that are completely finished that we're supposed to get this summer, and we didn't get them. So, think about how many movies we should have in 2021, hopefully.
Oh, yeah.
We should have some really good stuff. You'll have plenty of news then.
Yeah.
People are going to start, hopefully once things start flowing and whatnot, I think 2021 and 2022 is just going to be so overly stacked. It's going to almost to the point where it's going to get saturated. And I hope that some of these like lower independent movies don't get basically blown to the wayside because of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think 2021 is going to be that catch up year from last year. And it's going to be like every week is a big release because we're catching up on last year's, and we have movies already slated for 2021 that I think, unfortunately, those smaller movies might, not catch an audience in theaters and might have to find an audience on streaming, which is kind of the opposite of this year, where those smaller movies could make big bucks, but big bucks in a pandemic at the box office, where otherwise they won't have, just because there was nothing else out. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what 2021 brings for the movie slate. I mean, one of the big things we've talked about this year again is like the box office numbers, how drastically they've changed. I want to see when we get like two movies that come out the same weekend or within a week of each other do against each other, because we're just going to get those movies out every single week. It's going to be nonstop. So it'll be interesting to see where we end up by the end of the year next year.
I know. I'm still sad that I'm not going to have my Keanu Reeves versus Keanu Reeves battle at the box office with John Wick and The Matrix.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sad that won't happen, because that would have been a beautiful double feature.
Just let him shoot another one, and then they can release all three together in one weekend.
I'd be okay with that.
The Keanu weekend.
I don't know.
Speed 3.
What would that be? We had Speed on a bus, Speed on a boat. Would this be like Speed on a plane?
I would watch that.
Yeah.
Just don't make with heavy heart. I just don't want to have our Keanu Reeves turn into the next generation's Liam Neeson.
Hey, they're about the same age, and one of them actually is believable when they're kicking ass. All right. Should we move to our even bigger coming soon portion of this week, Brian?
Yes, the whole bigger little portion.
Yeah. So, we're talking about 2020 movies. Here is a brand new 2020 movie hitting Netflix December 27th, which is called Death to 2020, which is a mockumentary featuring some of the big stars of Netflix fame and, Samuel L. Jackson, because he's in everything. This is a mockumentary about 2020 and everybody's kind of thoughts and opinions on that. So, yeah.
At that point, is it much of a mockumentary?
I started watching it. I'm about halfway through it, and then it was time to chat with you guys, so I had to stop. But it's pretty funny, and I think they take shots at both sides, so it's it'll upset people on both sides probably. So, but it's funny.
Good. Yeah, I saw the trailer right beforehand because I had not really seen much on it. Even in my Netflix queue, it hasn't really shown up on it yet.
I'm working on adding it to my queue right now as we speak.
I didn't see anything about it until like the day it was released, and then all of a sudden it was it was there. So I watched it. It was good.
Yeah, I'm excited to kind of check it out and have kind of this palate cleanser for 2020. That's what this movie feels like in a way.
It kind of will be, yeah.
That is kind of the only new release we have coming out. I mean, Christmas, we had a big weekend last week with all the new releases. So next up, we have our local Sioux Falls State Theater movies for this upcoming week, which, I mean, for us here in Sioux Falls, this is a stacked lineup for this weekend and features kind of a different array of movies. First up, we have Grease, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Wolfwalkers, which is a brand new 2020 animated film, Jabberwocky, and Metropolis, all on the big screen at the Sioux Falls State Theater.
Have you guys made it in there yet?
I made it in there the first weekend for White Christmas. Got my membership, just need to get back down there and get there again. I'm curious about seeing Metropolis just for the fact of being in an old classic theater watching an old silent film. I just hope that I don't have a bunch of people making so much noise that can't enjoy a silent film in an old classic theater. Just getting that guy down the road just chomping on popcorn or something like that. They're like, no. They just need to just get rid of all noise making food in that place during Metropolis.
So no corn nuts during that one?
Oh no. I don't even eat corn. I don't even eat corn nuts, period. Those are just gross.
Would that be a bad movie food?
A little bit.
Brian, don't you bash corn nuts. They're a guilty pleasure snack for sure. Okay. I was there this past weekend to watch Rocky and Some Like It Hot, and they played the Metropolis trailer. I'm like, oh, okay, this is really cool. Just even seeing the trailer in the theater, but I unfortunately have to limit. I cannot go to all five. I have to limit myself, so I'm going to watch Grease and Jabberwocky.
Shocker, you're going to go see Grease.
I love Grease. This is a bucket list movie to watch on the big screen. So yeah, Grease is a go-to for me. And I have never seen Jabberwocky, and next month we may be doing something Terry Gilliam related. Maybe not. So that'll be a good segue into next month's movies for us is Jabberwocky. So yeah, John, have you made it to the State Theater at all?
I have not, but I do plan to get there. So maybe this will be the week. There's several good choices right there.
Yeah, this is a great week to go out. And I mean, the seats there are I love the seats there. They're incredible. They're reclining and you get your own table. It's perfect. I love it.
The seats alone are worth the membership.
That's true.
Not going to lie. The fact that I paid $65 for the membership, regardless of ticket prices, is worth it just for those seats alone.
All right, that is it for coming soon this week. And like I said, a very short week for that this week. But if you do want to check out our full coming soon article, that is available on backlot605.com. You can check out anything else that is coming to streaming or anything else that may be coming to theaters or any older releases coming to Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, all of those. So go check that out. It's coming soon, backlot605.com. But we are going to go ahead, take a little 30-second break here, and then when we come back, we are going to be talking about this week's featured movie, which is David Fincher's Mank. Hello, listeners. Are you craving even more movie content? head on over to our horror theme show, Slashlat 605, which is hosted by Sam Lenz, Blake Ginnathan, and myself, Casey Calderman. That is where we break down our favorite films in the horror genre and everything else that is related to the genre that us horror nerds love so much. Podcast is available right now on Anchor.fm, Apple, Google, and YouTube. We will see you there. All right, we are back here discussing our final film in the David Fincher series for the month of December, which is his latest film, Mank.
Breaks out the corn nuts.
I won't eat them.
I was like, call this good. I don't have to smell them. I'm doing this video conference, so I don't have to smell them. Yeah.
Corn nuts, perfect movie snack. We have settled it. That is true.
I realize I'm completely outnumbered here.
That might be
I realized I had some here, so I had to do it.
I almost want to put that up as a poll. Just be like, corn nuts, yes or no?
That is a great poll, actually. Corn nuts. We're gonna jump into corn nuts for 2 minutes here.
I'm sorry, guys.
No, that is all right. Corn nuts are like the snack of my high school. So I grew up eating them all the time, and I haven't ate them in a long time until this year. I'm like, yeah, corn nuts are still great. Just salty goodness.
You're also from Iowa, so it doesn't count.
Maybe that's an Iowa thing. I don't know.
State snack. So
state snack of corn nuts, obviously. All right, segueing back into Mank. I don't know how we can get from corn nuts to Mank, but we're just doing it. Mank is
It's not a corny movie.
It is not a corny movie. It is a 2020 movie. It is on Netflix right now from David Fincher, written by his father, Jack Fincher. It is about the creation of the greatest movie of all time, guys, Citizen Kane. There's no arguing that it is the greatest movie of all time, and no one can argue otherwise.
I can't argue because I've never seen it.
Brian, that's all right. I understand that. But this is not the Orson Welles, biopic that many would think when you're talking about a movie about the making of Citizen Kane. No, this is about the film's co-screenwriter, Herman J. Mankiewicz, played by Gary Oldman, who is, great as always in this. And it is about his ventures into creating Citizen Kane and creating one of the greatest screenplays of all time, and how he deals with his own alcoholism and other members of his own little inner circle, and how they help create the character of Charles Foster Kane. So Mank 2020. I think all three of us watched it here in the last week. What was your guys' first off overall impressions of Mank? I'll throw it off to John first.
Well, I learned quite a bit about this character, Mank, who's a real person. I had not really known of him before, Mr. Mankiewicz. When I watched the movie, I guess for some reason, I always thought that the movie was written and produced and everything. I thought that Orson Welles was the only one involved. Mm-hmm. So when I watched this, I actually was Googling quite a bit of stuff to find out, is this true? Is all of this true? And it's not all true. So there's some things in there that were not accurate. And I'm not a big fan of when people do that, when they have, a true story, but then they weave in a bunch of stuff that's not true just to kind of, I don't know, maybe it makes it a better story.
Spruce it up a little bit.
But it's weird. It's like it's an alternate history, like the movie The Irishman that came out last year, and there were things in there. It's all real people, but some of that stuff didn't happen. I did an interview with one of the people who it was his dad in the car in that movie, but he said that never happened. So you watch it and you're like, well, did this happen? Did this not happen? It's like history, but it's like my version of history, which is, I don't know, that's weird. But I did like the movie. And I was glad to find out that there's a person in the movie who commits suicide. That person doesn't exist in real life. That didn't really happen. So again, I don't know why they had that in the movie other than just kind of the weight of what they had just done. And again, overall, I think it was really good. And I learned a lot. And I thought Gary Oldman was amazing. Again, at the time of his death, he was only 55. Gary Oldman's older than that now. He died 10 years after this happened. Mm-hmm. So they cast a guy that's like 20 years or 30 years older than this guy would have been at the time. But I also think because of the drinking, he looked older than he really was too. Mm-hmm. But Gary Oldman did an amazing job.
Yeah, I think for me, he is the biggest crux of this movie, and why for me it works is Gary Oldman is real. I mean, Gary Oldman does rarely puts in a bad performance, if at all. So it's no surprise he's great in this movie, and I mean the whole movie hinges on him and his performance. I feel very much that this, in a way, this story is not one that needs to be told, but the fact that it was told is the whole reason that this movie was made in the first place. I mean, the whole reason this movie was made is to give light to Herman J. Mankiewicz, who, like you said, John, before this, I had also thought, well, this is Orson Welles is the guy who did everything on Citizen Kane, you know, and Orson Welles probably wants you to think that too. But
and I think I called him Harold. I don't think I even knew his name was Herman. So, but he goes by Mank all the way through the movie, you know.
Yeah, right. and that is one thing I never knew of beforehand, was that this guy even existed. So hearing that this, you know, he was one of the screenwriters of the movie, and that we can get into as we talk about this, who deserves credit, who doesn't. I think it's you know, in my opinion, it's pretty even both ways, that they both deserve credit. But this movie definitely is about Herman Mankiewicz, Mank, and how he takes all these people from his real life, whether they like it or not, puts them into his screenplay for Citizen Kane. And I mean, I think, you know, Gary Oldman's great in this. I think Amanda Seyfried is really good in this movie too. Charles Dance is always incredible too, but he's really great as William Hearst. I love Citizen Kane, so adding another level to Citizen Kane is already bumping this movie up a little bit. And yeah, Brian, what was your first thoughts on Mank?
First thoughts is, from the technical aspect of this film, I think it's absolutely like rock solid. I mean, in terms of something that you would call a passion project, you know, Fincher didn't, you know, skimp on, you know, given this the feels like this movie could have been made or was made, you know, what, 80 years ago? I can't even do my math right now. Mm-hmm. The fact that this movie, you know, would have been something that was made at that time, to the way that the screens fade to black, go to the next scene, the cigarette burns, when you know this movie is filmed digitally, and he purposely put in those aesthetics to make this movie feel like this movie is as old as the content of which it's talking about. That was the biggest thing that I noticed just from the get-go. You're absolutely right. I mean, in terms of Amanda Seyfried and Gary Oldman, they freaking crush it. You're absolutely correct. I was waiting for Charles Dance, and he is one of those kind of guys where sometimes it takes you a second to go, oh, there he is. Because pardon me, every time I think Charles Dance and I see his face, I always see his face from Last Action Hero. So, you know, the fact he's obviously kind of the blonde and old, obviously much older and whatnot. I was looking forward and finally be able to get to see him. He did a fantastic job as well. In terms of the actual story itself, I agree with you. I'm right there. Even though I've never seen Citizen Kane, my understanding and everything is, and I'm like John here, where between Googling and Wikipedia, I'm like, oh, I learned a whole lot of new stuff, including the fact that this wasn't written by David Fincher, but it's the fact that I didn't know Mank existed. I thought it was all Orson Welles that did this film and whatnot. But at the same time, too, like, I agree. It's a story that probably and should have been made, because you have somebody who is like the unsung hero to one of the best movies ever made. But at the same time, too, there's something about it that I was having a hard time staying engaged. Like, it was within the story itself where it's just like, okay, we can move on or something like that. So, from, like I said, from the technical aspect, it's top notch. It's the story is the part of it where I was just kind of, I'm like, okay, the movie felt longer than it probably and actually was.
You know how long it was? I don't remember exactly.
A little over 2 hours, right?
It seemed like a longer movie, but I don't know if it's because it really was or if it seemed like it. But one of the things I thought was really cool, them putting you in the 1930s and taking you back to this, you know, you really did feel like everything from, of course, what you're seeing on the screen, but also just what you're hearing. Yes. And the way that people spoke, And Gary Oldman's voice, he's got a great voice, but his voice in this movie is so different than his real voice. And I still can't quite pinpoint who he reminds me of when he's pretending to be Mank. But I think that it's the owl from Winnie the Pooh. I mean, he's got just when he's talking, he's got a bit of a British accent, you know, and it's just, I don't know, it's just a different voice. It's a very good voice, you know. It's appealing, you know. It's and even though he's drunk through most of the movie, and there's some scenes where he's very drunk, he seems to be a very intelligent man, and just everything about it. He was an interesting guy, you know, and an interesting character, and I kind of feel like Citizen Kane was written by booze.
Yeah,
he was struggling to get the writing done until all of a sudden the booze got on the scene. Then all of a sudden, no, this is a piece of cake now.
Yeah, it's like, no, we want you to clean sober. We want you to write this in 2 months. And then he does most of his work in the last 2 weeks because he's boozed out of his mind.
Yeah. Yeah. But you know what? I know people like that who, you know, and that's the way they are, you know, nothing wrong with that. You got to love them for who they are, man.
Yeah. Sometimes, it's, not to say you're condoning any sort of like addiction or anything like that, but at the same time too, it's like you have to work within the wheelhouse of how someone works. How does their brain function and whatnot? You can't get good workout unless they're in the ideal-esque situation for them to be able to produce the good work, which obviously for him means alcohol's involved.
And I mean, that's kind of the point, or a case for many screenwriters, is a writer's best friend is a bottle of booze right next to them as they're typing, out the story. So I mean, I think the biggest thing for Mank for me is that this is a very interesting character, but it's also, we don't get the writer's perspective in a movie very often.
No.
Whenever we get a biopic, it's usually the director and their process. It's very interesting. Go ahead.
The movie Trumbo by chance?
No,
I missed that one. Yeah,
that's been on my list of things I eventually want to see because I love Bryan Cranston.
Yeah, and I watched Trumbo because of Bryan Cranston, and then I discovered that Trumbo is a real person, and this all really happened. And I think if you like Trumbo, you'll like Mank, and I think if you like Mank, I think you'll like Trumbo because again, it's kind of this opportunity to look through the keyhole and see what were the writers doing back then. Mm-hmm. And two completely different storylines, two completely different people in the way they do things. But it was I think it was a good, for me, a good follow-up to watching Trumbo and kind of seeing a different perspective on the golden age of Hollywood.
I find it really interesting, like how he comes up with the characters that are in Citizen Kane from the people he knows in real life. I mean, it's definitely heightened for the movie, for both the movie Mank and the movie he's writing, Citizen Kane, but the similarities are all there. Like, you can see who the inspirations for Citizen Kane are in this movie here. Like,
and the scenery as they're walking around this palatial estate, and when he's at the party and you're in these big echo-filled rooms, mm-hmm. and when you watch Citizen Kane, it's very much the same thing. I would say in Mank, the rooms were filled with people more so than they were in Citizen Kane. It seemed Citizen Kane, all those rooms seemed a lot emptier, and I think that was probably on purpose.
Yeah, having watched Citizen Kane pretty much right after I watched Mank, it was really cool to see the similarities and made me like Mank a lot more, knowing that, rewatching Citizen Kane many years later. And I mean, like you said, that is a big thing, is the connections between like the characters, the setting for all these. I mean, they touch on, the political landscape of this time and how they have influenced elections. I mean, that's a big portion of Citizen Kane right there, is how he had an affair that affected his political election in that movie. And that's a big portion of this movie too. I mean, when they visit the William Randolph Hearst's house, it is pretty much the same atmosphere I get from Xanadu from Citizen Kane. Feels very similar.
It's like the set, it's like you're on the same set almost.
Yeah. And that's one thing I love about this movie is, like Brian said, like, it feels like I'm back in the 30s and 40s Hollywood. Like if I showed this movie to someone who didn't know who David Fincher or Gary Oldman or Amanda Seyfried was, they would think this movie was probably from the 1930s or 40s.
And I think they did a great job of making the actors look like actors from the 30s and 40s.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you look at they did a really good job casting people who look like they would fit in golden age of Hollywood very easily.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that was the biggest thing I said when I saw Amanda Seyfried in this movie. She looks like a 1930s and 40s movie star.
Yeah,
like she
absolutely.
just looks like it. Even the picture right behind Brian, like now, right there, like she looks like a golden age movie star right there.
And I never thought of her that way before until they put her in this role. And then you look at her and go, how did I not see that before? Because it's
especially the hair, especially.
Yeah. And just her eyes. I don't know how to describe it, but you know, there's a song from the 80s, Betty Davis eyes. I don't know if that's what she has, but she definitely has like the eyes of an actress from back in the day, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. Like those actresses back then, it was kind of a lot of their acting was in those eyes, and they had the big wide eyes, and she has
especially when this era, they were going from the silent movies to the talkies, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And think about what you have to do if you have no audio. Everything that you're doing has to be, you know, right here. It's all of the emotion that's in your face, and you know, so that's what they knew actors and actresses for. It was all their features and their expressions, and you know, so she was an actress that went from the silent movies to the talkies. So she definitely had that look.
And that is a big thing I give this movie props for, is the casting in this movie is impeccable. I don't know anyone else that could play some of these roles after seeing it. You know, there's many movie stars now, female, you know, movie stars that maybe could have fit, but for some, like we said, Amanda Seyfried just slides into this role perfectly and feels like of that age of Hollywood. Same with Gary Oldman, just him playing this drunk writer who used to be a critic. Like that just seems like a role perfect for Gary Oldman that no one else could play right now.
Even though he's at least 20 years older than the guy was at the time, but he fits so perfectly anyway.
Well, so you're making comment the fact that, you know, the age discrepancy versus Gary Oldman versus the person he's playing. The other thing that I want to point out is the fact that, you know, sometimes you lose some of that chemistry between characters and people because of the age discrepancy. And there is 27 years between Amanda Seyfried and Gary Oldman. So, I mean, Gary Oldman is damn near almost twice the age of her. And you don't really see that as a hindrance to this film. Like, they just play off each other so well. And they very, very much are of equals, regardless of the fact that, you know, Gary Oldman's been making movies longer than Amanda Seyfried's been alive.
And again, both are playing much younger versions, because Amanda Seyfried has to be in her 30s. She has to be playing younger 20s in this movie.
Yeah, she's born in 85, so.
Maybe not my favorite character, but I think one of the most interesting characters in this movie is Louis B. Mayer, you know, the head of MGM. He has some of the best lines in this movie. Yeah, I think he is one of the most interesting characters. And for me, the one that I lean towards being the biggest inspiration for Citizen Kane. I mean, a lot of people will talk about, you know, William Randolph Hearst might be the biggest. In this movie, for me, it felt like Mayer was kind of a really big influence for Kane. I mean, he has my favorite line of this movie is that we are in the business like no other, because the product we sell, we still own at the end of the day. Like that is, I've never really thought of movies in that way. And for being a huge movie fan, that's really interesting to think about, is that, you know, studios sell us the movie. What do we get out of it? We watch it once, and now guess what? They still own it. We didn't own anything out of this transaction. So
we paid them the money, the privilege to be able to watch their film.
Yeah. And I love that line from this movie. It's perfect for the setting of Hollywood during that time too, and the studios of that time.
Well, and the part that's funny is so to be completely slightly off topic, one of the things that I watched randomly over the course of this last week is I watched the behind the scenes / documentary for Jay and Silent Bob reboot. And I realized that I sound like I shouldn't be talking anything when it comes to Mank, whatever. But something that actually brought up something that came to my mind when I was watching Mank and that line came up was the fact that Kevin Smith, the guy who has made how many of these movies that a lot of people enjoy, that like things that he wanted to do, but he can't because the studio owns the property. So even though they are his films and things that he has made, there's things that even he himself is the guy that wrote, directed, and produced all these films and can't do things because the studio is the one that owns it. So it's like, even somebody like Fincher, he'd be like, you can put a passion project together, but at the end of the day, he's got the work, he's got that notch in his belt, but at the end of the day, he's not the one that gets to own it. And, hopefully he's got a really good contract to be able to make some residuals out of it when he's done.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think that's a good point. In like, I'll connect Kevin Smith even more to Orson Welles and David Fincher. Is that Kevin Smith is, in a way, he's kind of a modern Orson Welles in a way, in that he is the writer, the director, producer. Many times in his own movies, Silent Bob is in them, so a star. Look at Fincher; he's not ever in his own movies, but look at this movie here. Like, this is a Fincher project. This doesn't exist without David Fincher at all, because his dad wrote the script. It's the only script his dad wrote that has been, made into a film. I'm not sure if his dad has ever wrote anything else. It'd be really interesting to see where his dad came into this story with Citizen Kane. And that's where I would love like physical releases for Netflix stuff, because I want to see the behind the scenes of this movie. Yeah. As much as this is a behind the scenes of Citizen Kane, I want a behind the scenes of the behind the scenes. I want to know how.
I would actually watch that. Yeah. As much as I sound like I'm the Debbie Downer of this film and whatnot, but that would be something I would want to watch, just because we do kind of get that pull the curtain aspect of what was it like to make movies in the 30s and whatnot. To make a movie in the new millennium, in regards to make a modern movie about old times, and the way he did it. I mean, even just for the sake of like the editing process, and I mean, even outside of just the atypical behind the scenes. Oh, they're about to film this particular set piece and something like that. That I think would be a fantastic accompaniment to this film. Mm-hmm. Just give you a great big like box set of Citizen Kane, Mank, and the behind the scenes of both. Even
that would be really cool. Now think about this. Orson Welles rolls into Hollywood, and he has this literally like blank check. And the studios say you have 100% authority to do whatever. That's unheard of, So this movie couldn't have been made any other way. Mm-hmm. Even halfway through, their RKO is trying to buy the company so they can shut it down. And Citizen Kane, now the guy that it's about, what's his name? Randolph Hearst.
Hearst, yeah.
Isn't it him that tried to buy RKO to shut down this project?
Yeah.
But just think about, the faith they had in this guy to say, we're going to give you the keys to the castle and like whatever you want to do. And then they're saying, okay, but we want to be able to have the final say. And he's like, no, not interested. If you want final say, I'm not doing it. And they go, okay, we'll do this. And they hand him this opportunity to create something. They have no idea what he's going to create, but they give him complete control, and then he goes to Mankiewicz and says, hey, let's do this. We got the opportunity of a lifetime to make this movie that nobody else could make. And we're going to do this. And Mankiewicz happens to have these relationships that he didn't have. And he knows all of these people. He's going to parties at their house. Can you imagine how weird that would be to write the story about William Randolph Hearst and all of these different people that you're involved in, in your life, and to put out this movie, and his name isn't even officially supposed to be on it, and then they both win an Oscar. Neither of them go to the Oscars to accept their Oscar, which is weird. But I love at the very end, and I don't know if that scene really happened, but where he said, I'm accepting my award here. Without William Randolph or without Orson Welles around, just like when I wrote this movie by myself without him around. And I love that. And I'm like, I don't know if that really happened. I tried to find out, but I couldn't find it.
When that last particular scene, just because of the way they freeze framed it, yeah. I legit also went to go start looking for it and started actually finding pictures of the original Mank, just because just the way that it freeze framed, I wasn't even 100% sure it was Gary Oldman. That I thought maybe it was like an old clip that they pulled and whatnot. And I realized he looks nothing like Gary Oldman. So, But no, I'm curious too as to if that was something that was truly said, or if that was just kind of like the little cherry that David Fincher wanted to put at the end of his,
And at the end, when they had the audio from Argentina, I believe they had Orson Welles was in Argentina when he, accepted over the radio. I don't know if that was the actor or if that was really audio from Orson Welles, because the actor, again, I'm an audio guy. He sounded so much like Orson Welles.
Mm-hmm.
He did a really good job. Again, all of them, just to sound the part, to look the part, to make you feel like you're watching a documentary. It's pretty cool.
Definitely.
Yeah. Who was Orson in this movie? Tom Burke, who I've never heard of before.
I was gonna say some guy I'd never heard of. How would you like to be that
Orson
guy?
Welles.
Yeah.
Be like, we are going to make a movie. You're going to be directed by a guy by the name of David Fincher. You may have heard of him. Starring, Gary Oldman. You may have heard of him. And you're going to play one of the most infamous actors ever. You think you're up for the challenge?
And he nails it too. Like that is.
Yeah, he did a great job.
The Welles voice is one of the hardest things to mimic, and he is pretty spot on with his Orson Welles.
Very good. Yeah.
And I love the nose that they gave him too.
Yeah. I love the introduction of him in this when Mank is in the hospital bed and you just see Orson come in just shrouded in darkness. He's just a shadow and just says Mank. Just like it's a perfect introduction to introducing Orson Welles, who in this movie he's painted as the villain in a way. I mean, no one's really a hero or villain, but he's kind of placed as that in this movie.
He's got a commanding presence every time he's on the screen. But he's not on the screen much. When it's a movie about his movie, I was expecting him to be in, every other scene. But it's like, oh, hey, we haven't even seen him for like an hour now.
And I think that's that's the overall message for this movie, is that the movie was made to get Mank's name out there. And just the fact that the movie was made accomplishes that goal. But I think I kind of want to dive into the real life stuff a little bit, because for me, I do think there is a little bit he said type of thing where, Mank is saying, I wrote this entire movie. Orson is just taking credit because he's a egomaniac who wants to be, the writer, director, producer, actor, everything in this movie, even though he is just taking my script and putting it to screen. But on the case of Welles, Mank did sign away that he was not going to be, his name was not going to be attached to this. So therefore, Orson would have gotten credit for it. That is reversed in real life, and in this movie, we get to see that Mank does get the co-writer credit. And for me, from what I understand of how this movie actually came to be for Citizen Kane, is that Orson was kind of writing his own script while Mank was writing his own. And then at the end, who had creative control was Orson Welles, combined elements he liked from Mankiewicz's story and his own. And that's how we get Citizen Kane. So for me, a dual co-writer is the best possible case scenario for both guys, because I feel that is the most fair assessment of that screenplay, is that Mank wrote parts of it and Welles wrote parts of it. Therefore, co-writers is the best possible conclusion. But I think in many ways this movie pushes more towards it was Mankiewicz. They don't show a lot of Welles, like we said, or even get his side of the story, which is fine. We've had that multiple times in interviews with Welles, and you can look up articles that are written about it. So I think this is a great representation of Mankiewicz, who for all three of us here, we had never heard of this guy before. So it's great that we get a 2-hour story encapsulation of this guy's life. And I think, even Mank says it in this movie, you can't tell a guy's entire life in 2 hours. Well, that's what they do in Citizen Kane, and that's what they do here. And I love the parallels between the two there. But what do you guys think of the writing credit storyline between this movie and in real life?
I think one of the things that we maybe missed just a little bit, and we've kind of touched on, is the fact that we don't get to see a lot of the Orson Welles side of the story. So we don't know exactly. We just have to hope and look at this and say, okay, well, Orson is taking credit, and AKA being the villain, because he's taking credit for something that somebody else wrote and whatnot. But there is that gap where between the time when Mank finishes everything to now they're getting the Academy Award for this film that they're not showing up for. We don't know what happens in between then. What, what was turned into the studio for the film to be produced. Was it a rewritten script from Orson Welles? Was it Mank's script? That sort of thing. There's a whole portion of it we don't get to see. So we only get to assume either what the story's telling us or what history has told us. And even still, we have to come to our own conclusion going, it's probably both.
Well, again, at the end of the day, there are a lot of elements of this movie that we know are not true. So now that also puts into question how true is all of that.
Yeah.
I love the fact that he's saying this is the best work I've ever done. And I think it's really sad. In real life, I think that happens a lot too, where actors and musicians and, creative people who make it big in their 20s, and then, they have the huge number one hit, whether it's a movie that does well, or they have a song that's a huge hit. And then you follow their career and they don't have that type of success later in life. But some of their music that they do later in life is far better than their hit, but it just doesn't have an outlet. So think about that. If you were a singer in the 1980s or the 1970s and you had hits back then and you put out a song today, who's going to play that? Like it doesn't, there's no station out there for classic music that's brand new. It just doesn't exist. But these are people who are the best musicians in the world, and they have more talent, and now they've got more experience on top of that talent, but there's no outlet for it. So this guy, that's one of the things that kind of clicked with me when he's saying this is the best work I've ever done. He'd already made a name for himself as a writer. And this was, kind of after his career because he drank himself almost into oblivion. And then he did this masterpiece, and that's why he fought so hard to get his name on it. And the sad thing for me is until I watched Mank, I didn't even know who he was. And I'd seen Citizen Kane, and I still didn't know who he was.
Mm-hmm. And I think even bringing it like from music to movies, look at like even the director of this movie, David Fincher, has to go to, Fincher is a big film guy too, who would have loved to seen this in a theater, but you know what? He has to go to Netflix. Scorsese has to go to Netflix for their movies to get made, which is crazy to think that two of the greatest directors of all time have, and maybe that's putting a bad light on Netflix, but for them, they would love to see it on the big screen possible. But the people who are going to put up the money for them to at least just make the movie are someone like Netflix, which is, they're looking for content to create. And I think they want, Fincher's name attached to Netflix, Scorsese's name attached to it. And I think that's kind of the space we're at with movies right now, is that the biggest directors of all time have to try to find money somewhere else that they're just not getting from the traditional studio system that was ever present in this movie.
About a year ago, I don't know if you guys know who Dave Thomas is, but he was not the founder of Wendy's. That's a different Dave Thomas. But he was in... he was one of the McKinsey brothers. He was in a movie called Strange Brew. It was the number one movie of 1983 in Canada. So, but
I love me some Strange Brew.
Oh, it's awesome. So I did an interview with him
brothers
about maybe 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, and super nice guy, very nice guy. But he was working on a project with Netflix at the time for SCTV. They were doing like a reunion show. And when I was talking to him about this, he said they're putting out 1,000 new shows next year. So I think that was either last year or maybe it was supposed to be this year. And I said, 1,000 new shows. He goes, yeah, between movies and TV shows, 1,000 new projects. And he said, now think about that. If you go to a movie studio, how many movies are they putting out? Not 1,000. Mm-hmm. And he said, if you go to a TV station, to a network, if you go to ABC, CBS, Fox, add all of them together, how many new shows are you putting out? New ones, not something that's just season 47 of something that you've already done. You're not getting anywhere close to 1,000. And I said, man, how can they afford to do that? He said, they have 100 million subscribers giving them $10 a month. That's $1 billion a month.
Yep.
Think about that.
Yeah.
So So when you're talking about these big names that are going, hey, I want a place to do movies, they're going, okay, how many zeros do I write on this check?
So I'll even, if ironically enough, in terms of like spinning with the fact you were talking about like the old school music and stuff like that, because we have heard those people that are talking about like the sake of like Netflix and Amazon Prime, stuff like that, being like the death of cinema and whatnot. It's like Metallica. during the whole like Napster thing and whatnot, is they were trying to put their foot down and be like, you're killing the music industry, to realize, what, the music industry was evolving. And it's just that Sean, Flannery kind of hit the gas pedal to help, escalate it. Now pretty much everything is subscription based. You if you're getting your music, you're getting online. You don't go to the store anymore to buy CDs and whatnot. And a lot of these, like you said, is these filmmakers, they want to make movies, but if a studio is only putting out 20 movies that year,
think about how many they put out this year. Not many, right, compared to what about Netflix and Amazon and Hulu? What did they put out this year? This was the year people were home, they were streaming like crazy. I mean, this is a year that for some reason we watched Tiger King. I mean, so that became a thing. And I watched it trying to figure out, why is this a thing? And I got done with it. I was like, why was this a thing?
You made it further than I did. I only made it 2 episodes in, and I was like, I'm out.
I'm really patient when it comes. I watch movies. I love watching like independent movies that nobody's ever heard of. And I don't know anybody that's in them, but I'll watch this. And my wife checks out after about 10 minutes, and I stay and I watch the whole thing because I keep thinking it's going to get good. And then sometimes I'm right, but I'm usually wrong. Usually when it's done, she's like, so how did that end? I'm like, yeah, you made the right choice. So.
Yeah. That's where I am glad that, we do have those instances. But you're absolutely correct. Yes, there is that the money that needs to be spent just for the upkeep of like the Netflix system and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, like you got somebody who like me, I'm paying $18 a month because of that, and if they add $1 here, I'm still not, it's not like I'm paying exuberant $50 a month or something like that. If it's bringing me good, solid content, it's bringing me the directors, the Finchers, the Scorseses, if it's bringing in the writers, bringing in some of these actors that beforehand would have been like, there's no way on earth I'd make a VOD movie. Oh, wait a minute. Now that there's money in it, now that there's, eyes getting on it, a lot of these people, like, I mean, you look at even just like some of like even Nicole Kidman, for example, is doing a lot of this like TV stuff that she's doing for like HBO and Apple TV. 10 years ago, you would have been like, that would have been unheard of. But, they're like, all of them, writers, directors, actors, whatever the case is, I want to make my art. They're going to the places where the people are going to be like, we'll help you make it. So I am all for it. I just wish we'd have maybe some unified system and I'm not paying for like 18 different streaming services. That's the only like hiccup to the whole thing.
And I think someday we'll see that. I think we'll see where it all kind of goes through one subscription. I don't know. But then the problem with that is, if you have it where there's fewer channels available to you, then it becomes a control thing as well, where now there's not as much competition. So I think maybe we're actually in a better situation where, each one of them are trying so hard. I remember when Cobra Kai came out. I don't know if you guys watched that when it was on YouTube. So it came out on YouTube's premium channels, and we watched that. We subscribed to that specifically for Cobra Kai. And now season 3 is coming out right now, and it's on Netflix.
Yep. Netflix
bought it because it did so well.
It did so well, and YouTube was getting out of the scripted premium stuff that they tried to do for a couple of years. I know season 1 is just dropped, or season 3 is just dropping now, and they've already been greenlit for a season 4. And I'm sitting here going, I just want to try to find where I can get copies of Karate Kid Part 2 and 3 so I can watch those, so I can start watching Cobra Kai, because I haven't wanted to watch the show because I want to refresh myself on the movies.
Yeah. I think I have all of the DVDs, so we'll have to connect. Do you remember when movies came on DVD?
It has been a long time since I bought a DVD.
I think
I can say the same.
This whole conversation is really interesting, is that, and how it relates kind of to Mank, is that Mank is a lot about the studio system and how that worked back in the 30s and 40s. And we talked about how Orson Welles was 24, 25 years old when he made Citizen Kane and given free reign to make this big studio movie for RKO Pictures. And, looking at that today, you pick out a 24-year-old director, there is not a chance in hell Universal Studios is going to give them a blank check and say, whatever movie you want to make, we will bankroll it and go ahead. You're going to get a wide release wherever. That is not happening. I mean, even looking at Fincher and Scorsese are they can't find money. Or Kevin Smith, even, he has to, crowd fund most of his movies now, which is crazy. Is like, these guys make money and they make great movies. How are they not getting money anymore?
There has to be some arrangement like that with Adam Sandler at Netflix, though.
Right.
Get the blank check.
There's no way that they're reading these ahead of time before they write a check to him. But
well, and Adam Sandler's a prime example of the guy. He's like, if I'm going to go work for a studio, I'm going to go work for the studio that's going to let me do what I want to do. And they'll be like, all right, we've seen your past work and whatnot. And even though, he did get some crap about some of his most recent stuff with Netflix, but it was enough. It must have got enough eyes on it. There must have been enough viewership to the point where Netflix is like, you got a new contract. You can make more movies, whatever the case is. I mean, Adam Sandler isn't going anywhere. He's staying on Netflix for as long as they will keep cutting the check. And honestly, more power to him.
He's got some great stuff, but then I'll watch, some of these. I just watched this Hubby Halloween or whatever it was. Afterwards, I thought I should have checked out when my wife did.
See, that's another divisive movie because I loved. I love
really?
Halloween.
We have a very distinct divide of that movie in our little inner circle, if you will, because there's quite a few of us, myself included, where I'm like, what, it's campy, it's weird. But there are far worse Adam Sandler movies than Hubie Halloween, and I will take Hubie Halloween over some of those other ones any day.
Yeah. There were some parts that were not believable, but we'll just leave it there. It is an Adam Sandler movie, which one of my favorite movies ever is an Adam Sandler movie. So I like the guy.
Oh, I want more June Squibb. That's all I can say.
She's great in that. I don't know how we're going to relate Adam Sandler back to Mank at all.
I think he's making the movies he wants to make, like Orson Welles did.
There we go. Again, does that get us back on track somehow?
Adam Sandler is a modern Orson Welles.
See? Hey.
Yeah. Do you guys have any other thoughts you want to throw out there for Mank at all? I mean, I think we kind of touched on some of the big things for this movie. I mean, I have one little piece of trivia that I found really interesting that now that I put it in my head, I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. The piece of trivia I have is that Herman J. Mankiewicz, Gary Oldman's character, is the grandfather of Ben Mankiewicz from Turner Classic Movie fame.
Oh, see, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
That makes total sense now that you put it together. Like, his grandpa was a acclaimed screenwriter. Now he's one of my favorite movie personalities out there for Turner Classic Movies. That just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I never even connected the dots till you just said that.
And you would,
but now it makes perfect sense.
And a name like that, you would like, they've got to be related somehow, right?
Yeah.
It's not like a Smith or a Johnson or something like that. You're like Mankiewicz. There's like two of those, right?
The last thing I would want to touch on is because we talked about it last week with Social Network and the score. I mean, I think we have to talk about the score here because, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, for me, have delivered the two best scores of the year just here in the last month with Mank and Soul. Soul, I think, is the best score of the year easily. But the score in this is perfect. It sounds like a score from the 30s and 40s. Mm-hmm. And have those two guys who go from, Nine Inch Nails fame and doing kind of more industrial stuff with like the Social Network to do something classical like this is really, really cool to hear.
Now, I don't know if you know this, but one of the things I wanted to look up and I didn't do it. Do you know, was that all produced using like instruments and microphones from that era? Because I bet it was. It sounded like it was.
From the bit I looked up, that's what I gathered from it, is that they were using instruments from that era that would have been around during the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, it just sounded so vintage. It sounded to me like it almost could have been taken from, something back in the day. But yeah, it was very well done.
And my thought is, I mean, even without even looking it up, like Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross are the kind of individuals that I could see as going, if we're going to, I mean, this is kind of outside their wheelhouse. They have a very distinct sound. There's very much like if you listen like The Social Network and, Gone Girl and whatnot, there's a very distinct sound. And that's why they do what they do and whatnot. And I really hope that these two work with David Fincher until they're all dead. is because they're the Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross and David Fincher. They just get each other. But I think going into this and like it was nice to have something a little bit different, but you could still get that feeling of that it's them. Like their signature is still on it, but you still have it. Like a Social Network score would not work for this and whatnot. And I'm glad they're like, we need to use the instruments of the time or something like that to give us a good authentic score. I couldn't see those two doing basically half-assing it, just like when they did Soul. I mean, to be in a kind of a jazzy mood, they weren't just be like, oh well, we're just gonna make us another score like we would do. And I agree with Casey. These are one of the best scores to end the year with, and the fact that they're both Trent Reznor. Just keep giving the guy awards, I'd be okay with it.
Did you guys see any parallels between Social Networking or Social Network rather and Mank? Did you see a parallel between the two at all?
I think adding the parallel of Citizen Kane into that mix too kind of makes a lot of sense for Mark Zuckerberg. Should watch Citizen Kane a couple times.
He probably has.
Well, and to me, the thing that I saw was think about who this story that they're writing is about. In Mank, they're writing a story about a guy who gets to literally make the news because he owns the newspapers, and I can steer. And it was interesting that they weaved the political stuff in there. When I read online a lot about Mankiewicz, they said he really wasn't a political guy, and I thought it was cool that he was at that the political, the gubernatorial party at the party for the party, and he wasn't really a member of the party. And I've been at parties like that where I've been involved in things where I'm like, I feel like a pair of brown shoes at a tuxedo party because I know I don't really fit in here. But he was there. And it was kind of neat to see him almost like a fish out of water at that. But the thing that was interesting is if you look at William Randolph Hearst and owning the newspapers and being able to shape the news back then is kind of like Zuckerberg with Facebook and being able to shape the news now. Mm-hmm. Even though there's other different people who are writing the stories, it wasn't William Randolph Hearst typing the stories. It was people who worked with him. It's not Mark Zuckerberg typing the stories. It's other people putting stories, on there. But I just saw a little bit of a parallel between the two, and I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I had not thought of it until you brought it up. But as soon as you said, how do you think Social Network relates to Mank? I'm like, in every way possible it does. I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. And I kind of feel that's where Fincher's storytelling in a way is kind of going towards. He started off with dark and gritty stuff, with Seven and The Game and Fight Club. Social Network was kind of a little bit of a change for him. Gone Girl kind of went back to the old school David Fincher of the 90s, but Mank is definitely within that same realm of storytelling for him.
And I wonder if that's on purpose to kind of make people think of Zuckerberg as almost a Citizen Kane, William Randolph Hearst character,
Yeah, I don't want to get political on the show because our show is not political either, but I think there is there's a political figure of 2020 and before that also relates to the Citizen Kane character as well. That I don't know if he's ever watched it, but he probably should.
Yeah.
I will leave it at that. But final thoughts on Citizen Kane for everyone here. I'll go first and we'll throw it around the room. I think it's one of the best of the year. Gary Oldman, I think, delivers maybe the best performance of this year. I think Amanda Seyfried is great too. For me, it's not as great as the great Finchers, but if Mank is not on par with that, I mean, Mank is still a really good movie. And if that's one of your lower end movies, that's a high bar that you have set for yourself for David Fincher. So this was definitely a passion project of his, and you can feel that throughout. I think it's a perfect double feature with Citizen Kane, or even, like John said, with The Social Network. That would make a great double feature with this movie, or throw all three together. Why not? And also, it has Bill Nye the Science Guy in this movie, so thumbs up for that. I
legit saw him talking. I'm like, no, wait a minute here. Holy crap, it is. I myself, I'd say I think if I remember correctly, I put it around like 3 out of 5 stars, just because for me, it was from the sake of the performances and the technical aspect, it's top notch. For me, it was a little bit of the story that was, again, just I was having problems keeping my attention and keeping me engaged. So yeah, I'd say, but you're absolutely correct though. If this is a low end of a David Fincher movie, that's still a high bar. So I'm right there with you here. And that's even saying the fact that he doesn't like his own Alien 3 movie. So, and I do. So
Nice. No, I liked it. I thought it was really good. I predict that it will win some awards, and I predict that it will win more awards than Citizen Kane.
Did Citizen Kane just get the one?
Yeah, they got one award. But think about that. They were kind of taking on Hollywood in Hollywood. To even get the one was kind of amazing.
Yeah, because I mean, if we're not talking about a political environment now, it definitely was then.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like the movie that would have been snubbed for every nomination of the time, too. But the fact that it got, at least a half dozen nominations, I think.
Something like that.
So, yeah, and for I definitely see Mank being, winning for back in the 1940s for Best Original Screenplay. I think Mank will be in talks for the upcoming Academy Awards whenever those eventually happen.
Yeah, I agree.
All right.
Well, thank you guys for having me on the program.
Absolutely. Yeah. John, before you go, where can the people find you and Sunny Radio?
You can find us, if you're in Sioux Falls, on the radio, 93.3 FM. If you're not in Sioux Falls, you can find us on the internet. You can also find us on the internet in Sioux Falls. We're on the internet everywhere, I guess. sunnyradio.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us. I do got to ask one more question for you. What's been your favorite Movie Star Monday that you've done this last year?
Oh boy.
And why weren't we involved? No, I'm just kidding.
No. You know what? I think my favorite, even though he's kind of a weird dude, Pauly Shore, just because I've always liked him. And when I talked to him on the phone, I don't know what I was expecting exactly, but he was the guy exactly what you would expect. Mm-hmm. You know, I thought maybe that was just a character, and maybe it was, because there are some people who are kind of always in character, but he was a fun guy to talk to.
He's the weasel in real life.
Yeah, he kind of is. And he's got a new movie that's out on one of the streaming platforms, and it looked good. I've not seen the movie, but I watched the trailer. It's funny, my wife and then Dan, who works with me, they make fun of me because several of these people that I talk to, I've not seen the movies that they're in, and they're like, what are you even asking them about? I'm like, I have things to ask people. I'm an inquisitive guy.
Things?
Yeah, there's, remember that movie you were in? I've been in 50 movies. Which one? That one with people in it? I think it was about an umbrella or something. I have no idea what you're talking about.
I do know that you're talking about Guest House, and it's on Netflix right now because it's in my queue to watch. It's in my queue right now to watch.
It looks really funny, and I do want to watch it. So I'll be checking it out maybe this week. That'll be good.
I can't remember the last Pauly Shore movie, so I'm kind of excited to watch a new Pauly Shore movie.
Right.
And he looks different now. In this movie, he's got a beard, and he's older because it's been a little while since I've seen him in anything else. But it looked really good. I think it'll be fun.
And I will say is the fact that I give props to Pauly Shore for being able to stick it out for as long as he absolutely has. I mean, to come from the comedy family thing and whatnot, to come out of is it the comedy, either the comedy store or the Last Actor? Yeah, to basically live your life completely around comedy. The fact that he's the kind of guy that could have potentially have burned out decades ago, just because it's like the kid star that bails out by the time they're 25 because they're coked out of their mind. So the fact that we're even still getting Pauly Shore nowadays, bring it.
And he's talking about his neighbor is one of the guys from ZZ Top, and he's always coming over with barbecue. And I'm like, how fun would that be? I mean, this is pretty cool. I want to live right between those two guys,
Right?
Yeah. All right. Let's let the people know where they can find us. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Google, YouTube, Amazon Music, all those places. You can subscribe there. You can also check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/backlot605. You can join our Patreon. We have a $1, a $3, $5 tier. And for $5 tiers, you get our bonus episode for this month. You get one more bonus Fincher movie, which is The Game. So we're very excited to do that. We're recording this yet tonight. So if you're thinking about you need some more Fincher in your life, think about joining our Patreon. It's a fun time, and we do got to thank our patrons: Logan, Blake, Derek, Andy, Lou, Corey, and Darren. Thank you guys all so much for helping us out. We really do appreciate it, and I hope you all enjoy our game episode. I'm super stoked to talk about this, so that'll be a lot of fun. Brian, where can they find us on the social medias?
Let's see if I can get my stuff corrected here. There we go. Yep, I'm doing so good here. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Find us at backlot605.com or just, oh my God.
That is where you can find us too.
You can find us at backlot605.com, but in terms of the socials, just backlot605. Also on Facebook, join the conversation with the South Dakota Film Community Group. It's where we just like to, throw out there what's going on, what's people seeing, all that fun stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and we are kicking off a new series we will announce later on this week, so we'll just leave a little tease there. And then, of course, we do have our Schmuckies Movie Awards, our version of the Oscars, January 23rd, 7 p.m. I do think Mank will be involved somehow, some way. We'll see if it shows up at our Schmuckies Movie Awards. But
we're filming in black and white.
We should film in black and white.
That would be cool.
That would be
this
fun.
Whole episode should have been in black and white.
Should have.
Dang it.
Missed the ball. That's all right. John, thank you again so much for joining us. This was a blast. We got to have you on again to talk movies. This was so much fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I can send you a list of my favorites.
Let's do it.
That's a good start.
That would be perfect. Let's do it. All right. So this has been episode 112 of the Backlot 605 podcast. For Brian Mensing, I'm Casey Kelderman. We'll check you out next time on the Backlot of South Dakota.